Hello everyone, my name is Mark Frim and welcome to Kerbal space program. Today I wanted to share with you a rather exciting mission. To start off, I am flying a rocket today, and you probably have noticed a rather unfamiliar setting as KSP fades in the distance. This is simply because we are no longer on Kerbin, and in fact Kerbin doesn't even exist in the solar system. We are exploring Galileo planet's back, and our today's goal is Iota, the closest moon of planet Gael, which is now a new home for Kerbal kind. Getting into orbit of Gael is pretty much like getting into orbit of Kerbin. Size of the planet is the same, its mass is the same, even the atmosphere is the same. The only slight nuisance is the location of KSP, which is now slightly north of equator. However, once we are in orbit, we are in the uncharted territory. We obviously know the orbital parameters of Iota, so we know that this rather small moon has a radius of 100 kilometers and surface gravity of 0.085 g and is orbiting Gael in a nice circular orbit with a radius of 27,000 kilometers. Thanks to orbital mechanics and a bit of witchcraft, I estimated Δv budget necessary to land on Iota and get safely back to Gael, and it looks like we need at least 905 meters per second for transfer, around 200 meters per second for orbital insertion, a bit over 600 meters per second to land and safely get back to orbit again, and another 200 meters per second to inject our spacecraft back on a return trajectory to Gael. That's the theory, but this is Kerbal space program and things don't always go according to plan. So I over-engineered this rocket so we have a little bit more Δv than we need for the transfer and lander stages, in case something goes wrong. We are playing in the career mode, and at this point we have many limits on our vessel. This rocket had initially only 30 parts, and we still haven't researched many typical commodities such as RCS or rover wheels. This is my third major launch, and we will be reaching orbit and hopefully Iota as well. As you can see, I've managed to intercept Iota with about 911 meters per second spent, and after a small correction burn, we lowered our periapsis to about 22 kilometers above Iota's surface. We also have a bunch of other mods installed, and the one I'm concerned with the most at the moment is USI life support. I've estimated the minimal time of flight to be a bit over 1 day, but that's in the ideal conditions. I suppose Jeb and Bob are going to stay in those tiny pods for about 4 days, but since they can survive for 14 days without extra supplies, they should be fine. The vessel that we're flying is obviously stock, and you can find the download link in the description as well as the mod list. I must say I am most impressed with the visuals of the planets, and I highly recommend you check out this pack, it's just beautiful. As we are leaving Gael and head for Iota, a small correction burn was needed to change our inclination and lower our periapsis upon arrival. I am glad we have more fuel than we need. Upon entering Iota's sphere of influence, I started collecting first bits of science for this mission. Bob was out on a spacewalk because he was the only one that could reset materials bay and goo containers, and we need 2 samples from each to get maximum science. Once this was done, it was time to set a maneuver node at periapsis and enter low parking orbit over Iota. Our theoretical estimates were at 200 meters per second, and we achieved the orbit with a bit over 250 meters per second, which was quite close since my transfer burn was far from ideal. With Jeb executing the burn, we can admire the visuals of Iota in the background. It has a rough and sort of crusty surface, but looks really nice. Landing on its surface will be interesting, for sure. At this point, I started my usual science routine yet again. Bob was out collecting various readings from the scientific equipment we have brought with us, and once he has finished, it was time to look for a suitable landing spot. Orbital velocity of our spacecraft at 22 km altitude over Iota was 255 meters per second, again very close to our estimates. I packed more than 400 meters per second extra in our transfer stage, so we won't have to worry about efficiency that much at this point. Iota has lots of interesting features on its surface, and I had no idea what biomes we can expect. In the end, I spotted a number of large crevices on the equator and decided to land there. I was hoping that we might end up in an area where 2 biomes meet, or that the bottom of those crevices would be a biome itself. With all the extra fuel we have on board, that would allow us to hop between the two biomes and get research from both of them, effectively doubling the science yield for this mission. I obviously know the outcome now, as I am recording this commentary after the mission was done, but at the time I had no idea if this was going to work. It was my first trip ever to Iota, and I was quite excited about what we might find on the surface. With all the extra fuel we had in the transfer stage, I was able to almost land the vessel on the bottom of a large crevice and decided to decouple it right before touchdown. We have landed safely on a slightly sloped surface. Our lander wasn't very stable, and after doing some testing I decided to leave Jeb inside with SAS engaged to prevent the lander from tipping over. In the meantime, Bob went outside to collect science data and obviously plant the flag. I must say I absolutely love his moustache. Our lander stage has about 900 meters per second delta V and was designed to land and take off from Iota and then bring our Kerbals back to Gael. Since we landed it almost full on the surface of Iota, it meant we had much more fuel than we needed to get back home. This means we can take our chances and try to land it somewhere else in the vicinity, hoping we will end up in another biome. The bottom of the crevice was identified as lowlands, so I decided to investigate cliffs towering around us. After a short trip, we landed outside the crevice, and luckily enough we ended up indeed in another biome. The terrain wasn't very flat and the lander almost tipped over, but with Jeb's help I've managed to keep it straight. It would be a very bad and premature ending to our mission if that happened. Our brave Kerbals planted yet another flag, because if there is one thing Kerbals love other than explosions, it's planting flags. Our new landing spot was identified as Highlands, and after collecting all the available science from this location, we are ready to launch back into orbit again. Reaching the required 250 meters per second to achieve a stable orbit around Iota was easy, especially with all the extra fuel we had on board. It was finally time to plan our trip back to Gael. As we were flying over Iota, I couldn't get over how pretty this moon is, or in fact all planets and moons are in this pack. I am really looking forward to exploring all of them. As for Iota, it would be nice to send a surface scanning satellite to get as much information as possible about all the different biomes and terrain. Iota's low gravity also means it could be a great location for a refueling base. But those are the plans for the future. Right now we still need to bring our best pilot and our best scientist safely back to Gael. Our injection burn was a bit below 200 meters per second, again really close to what we have estimated, and placed us at a nice aerobraking altitude of 40 kilometers above Gael's surface. I've also checked, just to be sure that everything is alright, how our Kerbonauts were doing with regards to supplies. We wouldn't want Kerbals dying right after 2 successful landings, would we now? But they are of tough sort and can survive on snacks smuggled inside the small pods for quite some time apparently. With Iota fading into distance and Gael getting closer and closer, it was time to prepare for aerobraking and re-entry. Right before re-entry I burned up all the remaining fuel facing retrograde and decoupled the lander stage, revealing the heat shield that should ensure our Kerbals won't end up in a fiery death. It worked pretty well, with only some occasional bits and pieces of our spacecraft sticking outside in the burning plasma, but nothing exploded. After the re-entry, parachutes were deployed and Jeb and Bob safely landed in the grasslands, bringing over 1000 science from our first mission to Iota. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up, it means a word to me. If you would like to see more content of this type, please let me know in the comments below and consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!